You're clearly the junior representative." My father didn't even look at me as he slid the contract back across the polished conference table. His voice carried that dismissive tone I remembered from childhood. "Let the real decision-makers speak." The room went silent. 12 executives sat frozen. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. His company was bleeding cash, drowning in debt, and he still wore that same smirk. He didn't recognize me. My hands didn't shake. I folded them neatly on the table, a gesture of control I'd practiced for years. He leaned back in his leather chair. "Your firm clearly doesn't understand what it's dealing with. Callahan Industries has been a market leader for 30 years. Oh, I understood perfectly. Because 5 years ago, this man told me I would never amount to anything, that I didn't have what it took to succeed in business. And now his failing company sat across the negotiating table from mine. My name is Elena Callahan. I'm 29 years old. And this was the day my father finally realized exactly who he'd raised. But to understand how we got here, you need to know what he did first. It happened at my mother's birthday dinner 5 years earlier. Crystal glasses caught candlelight. Family friends filled the private dining room. My older brother Cameron sat beside my father, smiling like he'd already inherited the world. I'd been 24, fresh out of business school, full of ideas. I stood up, heart racing, and pitched my concept, an operations software built specifically for small manufacturers, something to help them compete with larger companies through efficiency. My father laughed, not a polite chuckle, a sharp, cutting laugh that silenced the room. "Elena, sweetheart," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "you don't have the stomach for real business. Why don't you leave the ventures to your brother? He actually understands how these things work." People avoided my eyes, looked down at their plates, shifted uncomfortably. My brother raised his glass in a toast to my father's wisdom. Then my father announced he was investing $2 million into Cameron's third startup, a social media platform that would compete with established giants. He didn't even ask how much funding I needed. That night, I realized I wasn't just unsupported. I was actively dismissed. I tried once more a week later. I met him in his office, walnut desk, wall covered in industry awards. My childhood soccer trophy shoved in a corner cabinet, dusty and forgotten. "I'm not asking for $2 million, I said carefully, keeping my voice steady. "Just a small seed loan. $50,000 to start. I'll pay it back with interest." He didn't look up from his phone, kept scrolling through emails like I wasn't there. If I funded every emotional hobby you girls start, I'd be bankrupt within a year. Emotional hobby. Girls. I watched him sign a check that same afternoon. Another investment in Cameron's app relaunch. The previous version had failed, but my father called it learning experience worth supporting. When I turned to leave, he said one more thing without looking up. "When this crashes and burns, don't come crying back here. I won't bail you out." His words hung in the air like a challenge. I didn't respond. I just walked out, and I never asked him for anything again. I sold my car the next week, a Honda I bought myself in college. It wasn't worth much, but it gave me $8,000. I moved into a studio apartment with peeling paint and a bathroom the size of a closet. My bed was a mattress on the floor. I lived on rice, pasta, and coffee. Lots of coffee. Every investor meeting ended the same way. "This is interesting, but who's backing you?" When I said no one, their tone shifted. Interest cooled. One older man in an expensive suit actually asked, "If your own father doesn't believe in you, why should we?" That question haunted me for months. But it also taught me something fundamental. I didn't need belief from people who couldn't see potential. I needed leverage. I needed proof. I needed results. So I stopped pitching to investors who wanted pedigree, and I started building quietly, methodically, with the resources I had. I learned to code, watched hundreds of hours of tutorials, built the first version of my software myself. It was ugly, clunky, barely functional, but it worked. 3 months before my money ran out completely, I met Mara Vance. She was a retired CFO who'd made her fortune in manufacturing logistics. She attended a small business workshop where I was demonstrating my barely functional software. Afterward, she approached me. That presentation was rough. She said bluntly. I nodded, ready for rejection. But the underlying concept is solid. She continued. Walk me through the technical architecture. We talked for 2 hours in a coffee shop. She asked about margins, scalability, customer acquisition costs. She didn't ask about my father, didn't care about my pedigree or connections. She just wanted to see the numbers. When I finished explaining my financial projections, she leaned forward. You've built this without any external funding? Yes. She smiled for the first time. Good. That means you won't panic under pressure. You know how to stretch a dollar. She wrote the first check, $25,000. It wasn't big by venture capital standards, but it was enough to survive another 6 months. And I swore to myself I would never beg for support again. I would earn it. While I worked 16-hour days in my tiny apartment, my brother's company was everywhere. Podcasts, tech conferences, business magazine covers. Funded by my father's seemingly endless capital, Cameron hired aggressively, rented premium office space. Through launch parties, my father appeared in interviews talking about supporting the next generation of innovators. He meant Cameron, but when I looked closer at Cameron's company, I saw cracks, massive overhead, flashy hires who produced little, no sustainable revenue model. My father was building an empire on ego and appearance. I was building one on efficiency and numbers. And numbers, I learned, don't lie. They compound. They reveal truth. While Cameron's company looked impressive, mine was becoming profitable. Small clients at first, manufacturers with 10 employees who needed better systems. But they paid on time. They renewed contracts. They referred others. Growth was slow, but it was real. We officially launched 18 months after that first meeting with Mara. No press release, no launch party, no social media campaign, just 5 manufacturing clients who desperately needed operational efficiency. Within 6 months, they'd cut operating costs by an average of 23%. Word spread the way real business spreads. Through results, one client told another. That client told 2 more. My software worked. It solved real problems. And it cost less than hiring additional staff. Within a year, we had 32 clients. Within 2 years, we had 90. Revenue grew steadily. We hired carefully, invested in customer service. For the first time in my life, I felt genuinely powerful. Not because of my last name, not because of connections, because I built something that worked. And the best part, no one in my family even noticed. My father never called, never asked how my hobby was going. Cameron was too busy with his own failing venture to care about his little sister. I existed outside their awareness entirely, which gave me freedom to build without interference. 3 years after that dinner, my brother's company imploded spectacularly. The social media platform never gained traction. User numbers were inflated. Revenue was practically non-existent. Mismanaged funds. Employee lawsuits claiming unpaid wages. Burn rate so high the company consumed money faster than my father could provide it. It made local business news. Not in a good way. My father stepped in publicly to stabilize leadership and restructure operations. Privately, according to industry contacts I'd made. He poured another $1 million into the failing company. He never called me, never once asked if my business could use support now that it was actually succeeding. But industry insiders started whispering something new. Callahan Industries is overextended. The old man is bailing out his son's vanity project instead of focusing on his core business. Their quarterly reports are concerning. I listened to these whispers carefully, and I waited because I'd learned that timing matters more than almost anything in business. 3 years into my company's existence, we were solidly profitable. We had cash reserves, strong partnerships, a growing client base. I could have expanded aggressively, hired faster, opened new offices. I didn't. Instead, I focused on strategic acquisitions, small competitors who had good technology but weak business models. I bought them carefully, integrated their best features, retained their key employees. One by one, we built infrastructure my father had never prioritized, redundant systems, diverse revenue streams, careful financial management. The market began shifting. Larger manufacturers started looking for the efficiency tools we provided. And then something unexpected happened. One of my father's biggest clients reached out to us. Midwest Manufacturing. They'd worked with Callahan Industries for 15 years, but they were frustrated with outdated systems and poor service. They wanted to explore alternatives. That client switched contracts 6 months later. Publicly, they issued a press release thanking Callahan Industries for years of service while announcing their new partnership with Vance Solutions, my company named after my first investor. Stock analysts noticed immediately. Callahan Industries shares dipped 3% in a single day. It wasn't catastrophic, but it was visible. My father went on a business podcast the following week. I listened while working late in my office. Market volatility affects everyone, he said smoothly. We're experiencing normal competitive pressures. Nothing concerning. I almost laughed. Market volatility doesn't cause a 15-year client to switch providers. Operational failure does. Poor service does. Taking customers for granted does. Arrogance does. And his board of directors was starting to see it. 6 months after losing that major client, an executive from Callahan Industries requested a meeting with me. Patricia Holmes, former VP of Operations who'd recently left the company. We met for coffee in a neutral location downtown. I left because the board doesn't trust his judgment anymore, she said quietly, stirring her espresso. He's making emotional decisions, throwing money at his son's ventures while neglecting core business needs. I listened without reacting. She continued, the company is carrying significant debt, more than the public reports show. If someone offered stability and fresh leadership, the board might listen. I set down my cup carefully. Why are you telling me this? Because I know who you are, Patricia said. I've watched your company grow. You're methodical, strategic, everything your father used to be before ego took over. She slid a business card across the table. Her new consulting firm. If you ever decide to make a move, call me. I can facilitate introductions. I took the card. That's when I understood. This wasn't about revenge. It never had been. This was about timing, about being ready when opportunity presented itself. Through a holding company I'd established, I made a quiet acquisition proposal 3 months later. Not hostile, strategic, debt relief in exchange for majority control, operational restructuring, leadership changes. The proposal went through the board's acquisition committee first. My father rejected it within 48 hours. He didn't know the proposal came from me. The holding company's name revealed nothing. He called it predatory in an internal memo that leaked to me through Patricia's network. Some vulture fund trying to take advantage of temporary challenges he'd written. I called it patient capital, strategic thinking. The difference between us summarized in 2 responses to the same proposal. I filed the rejection away, and I waited for the next quarterly report. 2 quarters later, Callahan Industries' debt structure leaked to a financial news website. Someone on the board, frustrated with my father's leadership, had shared confidential information. Not me. I'd learned to keep my hands clean. But the leak accomplished what I couldn't have done directly. Creditors panicked. Suppliers began demanding faster payment. 2 major clients put contracts under review. The company's stock dropped 31% in 1 week. My father went on another podcast. This time, he sounded defensive. Angry. Competitors are spreading false information. He claimed, our fundamentals are strong. But the board knew better. They called an emergency session. And this time, they reached out first. Through Patricia, I received a message. They want to negotiate. Fast. Before the situation deteriorates further. I scheduled the meeting for the following week. Corporate headquarters. Main conference room. I prepared meticulously, reviewed every financial document, studied every contract, knew their vulnerabilities better than they did. And I walked into that building ready, which brought us to the negotiating table. Present moment, conference room, my father across from me. He still didn't recognize me. I'd changed since that dinner 5 years ago. Professional wardrobe, different hairstyle, confidence that came from building something real. I let him dismiss me as a junior representative for exactly 30 seconds. Then I slid my business card across the polished table. He picked it up automatically, barely glancing at it. Then he read it. Elena Callahan, CEO and founder. Vance Solutions. His face drained of color. The arrogant smirk vanished. He looked up slowly, meeting my eyes for the first time. Elena, I held his gaze steadily. Yes. The room went absolutely silent. Every executive at that table suddenly understood the dynamics they were witnessing. This wasn't just business. This was reckoning. My father tried to recover his composure. I didn't realize you'd built such an impressive company. That's wonderful. His voice sounded hollow, forced. You never asked. I replied calmly. The board members exchanged looks. Patricia sat at the far end, her expression carefully neutral. My father shifted in his chair. Well, I'm glad you're here. Family supporting family. We can work together on... I'm not here as your daughter. I interrupted. I'm here as CEO of a company your board has invited to discuss acquisition terms. His jaw tightened. For the first time in my life, I watched my father look genuinely uncertain. And I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel vindication. I just felt steady, like I'd finally stopped carrying weight that was never mine to carry. I outlined the acquisition terms clearly. Debt restructuring, operational integration, leadership changes, including immediate removal of inefficient financial practices, asset consolidation, staff evaluation, performance metrics implementation. My father interrupted. You can't just dismantle what I built over 30 years. I looked at him directly. I'm not dismantling anything. I'm stabilizing what you broke through poor management and nepotistic decision-making. One board member cleared her throat. These terms seem reasonable given current circumstances. Another nodded. The operational audit findings support most of these recommendations. My father looked around the table, realizing he was outnumbered. His board, the people he'd appointed, were siding with me because I had what he'd lost. A clear strategy. Sustainable business practices. Results instead of promises. This is a betrayal, he said quietly. No, I replied. This is consequence. My brother Cameron burst into the conference room mid-presentation. No one had invited him. He worked as a consultant now after his company failed, but he had no official role here. This is insane, he shouted, pointing at me. She's stealing our family legacy. Dad, you can't let her do this. I didn't raise my voice, didn't react emotionally. The legacy was already bankrupt. I said calmly, I'm offering a path forward that preserves jobs and operations. You're doing this for revenge. Cameron insisted. I'm doing this because the board requested a solution to a financial crisis your father created. Security appeared in the doorway. Patricia must have called them when Cameron's shouting started. Please escort Mr. Callahan from the building, the board chairwoman said. Cameron looked at our father, waiting for him to intervene. For the first time, my father said nothing. He just sat there silently as security led Cameron out. The board vote happened after a 30-minute private deliberation. I waited in an adjacent conference room, drank water, reviewed my notes. Patricia joined me. However this goes, you should be proud. You built something real. I know, I said. The chairwoman called me back in. We've reached a decision, she announced. The board votes to approve the acquisition under the terms presented, 7-2. I nodded professionally. Thank you for your confidence. My father remained as transitional advisor. Temporary position. 6 months maximum. Not CEO. Not chairman. Not in control. Just temporary advisory. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. I felt something unexpected. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. Closure. The media exploded within hours. Daughter acquires father's failing manufacturing empire. Elena Callahan rescues company her father refused to support her in. Business journalists loved the narrative. Underdog story. Gender dynamics. Family drama. The comment sections lit up. Some called it ruthless. Others called it inspiring. My father released a statement through his publicist. This represents a strategic partnership that will strengthen both organizations. I'm proud of my daughter's accomplishments. I didn't correct the statement publicly. Truth reveals itself over time. I didn't need to force it. My phone rang constantly. Interview requests, profile pieces, podcast invitations. I declined most of them. I had a company to integrate, operations to streamline, employees to reassure. The work mattered more than the publicity. The internal audit began within 2 weeks. What we found was worse than the board had disclosed. Reckless loans to Cameron's ventures, nepotistic hiring practices, financial decisions based on ego rather than analysis. None of it was illegal, just arrogant, wasteful, unsustainable. The board forced my father's early retirement after reviewing the findings. No scandal, no public shaming, just quiet consequences. He signed the retirement papers without ceremony, cleaned out his office on a Friday afternoon. I didn't attend, didn't need to witness it. By Monday, his nameplate was gone from the executive floor. I walked into his old office alone the following week. Same walnut desk, same wall of awards. I noticed something in the corner cabinet, my childhood soccer trophy, the one I'd won at 12 years old. Still dusty, still forgotten. I picked it up carefully and moved it to the center shelf. Not for him, for me. A reminder that I'd been building toward this moment long before I knew what I was building toward. That little girl who played soccer, who wasn't her father's priority, who learned early that she'd have to fight for everything. She'd won. The restructuring took 6 months. I avoided mass layoffs. Instead, we streamlined departments and reassigned people based on actual skills rather than connections. implemented transparency measures, clear performance metrics, regular communication. Employees who'd operated under fear and uncertainty for years began to relax. They could do their jobs without political maneuvering. Revenues stabilized within 2 quarters. Not explosive growth, sustainable, steady improvement. Profit margins increased as we cut wasteful spending. Client retention improved as we focused on service quality. Everything my father had neglected in favor of appearance, we prioritized, and the company responded. Industry analysts who'd once praised my father's visionary leadership now studied my operational strategies. Podcasts invited me to discuss management philosophy. I accepted a few, spoke honestly about methodical growth and sustainable practices. Business schools asked me to guest lecture. I did 1 per semester, talked to students about building without external validation. My company became a case study in strategic patience, but I never made it about my father, never publicly criticized him, just focused on the work. Because success doesn't need to gloat. It just needs to exist. My father never contacted me after his retirement. No apology, no congratulations, no acknowledgement, just silence. My mother called occasionally. We had lunch every few months. She never brought up the acquisition unless I did. Cameron stayed distant. I heard through family that he'd started another venture. I wished him well, but maintained boundaries. And surprisingly, I didn't need anything from my father anymore. For years, I'd wanted his approval, his recognition, his belief. Now, I realized those things had never been necessary. I'd built everything without them. His absence felt lighter than his approval ever would have. 5 years ago, I was the daughter with an emotional hobby, the girl who didn't have the stomach for real business. Today, I run a merged organization with 300 employees across 2 companies, built on discipline, not ego, on numbers, not narratives. My father didn't lose because I destroyed him. He lost because he underestimated me, because he chose favoritism over fairness, because he built on appearance while I built on foundation. Here's what I learned. Never beg for a seat at a table you're capable of owning. Build in silence while others build in noise. Let arrogance collapse under its own weight. And when the moment finally comes, when you sit across from the person who said you'd never succeed, don't gloat. Don't explain. Just slide your business card across the table. Calmly, professionally, powerfully, because success doesn't scream. It signs contracts. I'm Elena Callahan, and I don't need my father's approval anymore. I have something better. I have proof.